we've talked for years and used this term called four-walling a show.
Yeah.
Right. Where the general idea is you rent the room, you
do the gig.
You do the gig with your band. You set the ticket prices. You do all the stuff, which is different than a club saying we're going to pay you $600 to come.
You're basically acting like a promoter.
You're doing more of the work.
Right.
Someone has a venue. You're putting a show up inside it, so you're four-walling this thing. I'm curious that process of not just saying I have this show that I know and I'm going to go four-wall it. You start with, I have an idea for a musical that I'm going to write, or even a play. Have you written plays or just musicals?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly musicals and musical or plays with
music. Right. Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
So you have this idea for a musical you're going to write, and then you set about writing it.
Right.
And then you find a venue and you find people to do it with you.
Yep.
And you get all the way through. So there's this, from
raise
germ,
all the money,
raise all the
hire all the designers.
From germ to closing night, you drive the bus on this sometimes. And then other times you'll do shows that, other people have written or producing or whatever.
Times that I'm, I'm a musician in the band. Playing the lead character or playing a supporting character or I'm the lighting designer or whatever. I mean, it's for theater, it's all industry. Like, what do you need me to do?
What do you need me to do?
Yeah.
Right. And so this, I'd love to, like, I want to talk through that experience because I think there's things that all of us that play in bands or do this can learn from this idea of, okay, so you have this idea for a show, you've started writing the show, then when it comes time to selecting the right venue for this show, that's where I kind of want to, that's the entry point I want to start with here.
Well, it's tough because, there aren't venues to do that. Most theater venues have their own thing going on.
Yep.
They pick a season.
Sure.
They do these are the shows we want to do. And it's usually the same 20 shows they've been doing for the last 30 years.
The shows that sell tickets keep selling tickets.
Right.
It turns out.
And it's,
Whatever.
It is what it is. It's an industry like anything else.
Yep.
I ended up, I was told a lot when I was young that you can't do that. You're not a writer. You're not a creator. You need to stay in your lane. And I fought really hard against that.
Did anybody ever tell you can't play cello as a bass?
No.
Great. I don't know. Somehow you wound up playing cello as a bass. So there you go.
Did that. I don't, and it was funny too, because sidetrack a little bit. I was like, nobody's doing this. And then I found a band that was doing it.
Yeah.
The Dead South in particular, a huge band. They're not really that big in the States, but they're bigger than most people realize.
Yep.
In fact, I reached out to him to ask him how the cello bass player in that, how he amplified his cello. And we went back and forth a little bit.
Sure.
But where was I? Producing a show. I was told you can't do that. So I had this idea to write, and I was always writing music. I grew up in a very musical family.
Sure.
I think previous episode I was on, I talked a little bit about that.
Yep.
So it was mostly music, and I didn't do musicals. I was doing plays as a young actor. And I was making a living, actually, as a teenager. Not a living, but it was a job. I got paid to do it.
Yeah.
And then musicals kind of started entering the communities across the country. Musicals have always been popular, but at a certain point, I think it was in the 90s when it really just became a thing. It's because Disney got involved and all the big companies. So I got into musicals, and I didn't really write musicals. I wrote music and I wrote plays and scenes and sketches. And it wasn't until this is the thing, Dave, I had people in my life, and I grew up in a very artistic family, saying, you can't. This is what you're supposed to do. Yep. Even with a very liberal...
Stay in the box. You're an artist. This is what the box looks like.
You'll never be this.
Yeah.
So I stopped writing.
Oh.
And then I met my wife, and in my 30s, she was like, you're really great. You should write more.
Huh.
And so I did. And
I didn't realize that this was a thing that you had sort of put on the shelf.
I did, yeah.
Wow.
Well, I was,
No, I get it. I understand why.
Dave. You don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah,
Dave.
yeah.
So somebody says that to you enough.
You start to believe
people,
them.
Right? These people that you look up to, especially.
Yeah.
And she was like, F them. You write something. And so I did. I sat down and started writing again, and she's the reason.
Huh?
You know,
I've known you for how long, and I had no. That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. So really, it was done at that point. I already had some relationships with certain types of theaters and venues.
But that's like, okay, so there's lesson number one. Like, you have to network.
Yes, but you also have to have a viable ability.
Yeah, well, right. I know, but viable ability sitting in your apartment or your house or whatever doesn't
but
get
that's
you.
The first thing you need to have.
We call that table stakes, Billy.
Is that what is table
stakes? Like when you're going to show up to a poker game.
Right.
You don't necessarily need to be good at poker, but you got to have the money to put on the table.
Absolutely.
The table stakes, because otherwise you can't sit at the table.
But you're not going to win unless you know how to play.
Right. But the know how to play in this really weird analogy that we're doing here.
Well, have you met me?
Yeah. Is the networking, right? But the table stakes is you got to have some talent.
Yes.
You got to have a product.
Networking, yes, but networking, you have to have the skills.
Yeah.
I say talent because that's what people use, but talent is not innate. A passion and all that is, but skill is something else.
Yes.
But you also have to have relationships and relationships with people you have worked with and created with that see you as a viable artist.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to sell tickets.
You got to,
Yep.
You got to put butts in the seats and money in the box.
Yeah. But really what it comes down to is having the skills and being able to put out a good product.
Yeah.
A good piece of work that you're doing. And even if you don't sell the tickets, you have to cultivate that audience anyway. We had this little conversation earlier about that. You have to cultivate. You have to build it.
But it's not just building it for one show. Even if you're right, like you build an audience
over time
of people who are fans of your work, not of a specific piece of your work.
Exactly. Right. And there may be pieces that people are like, Gay Bride of Frankenstein. People love that. They want me to do it every year. And, it's a musical I wrote, rock musical I wrote, which is great, but I have other things I want to do.
Right. Right. Yeah. Your pieces, any individual piece of work or even selections of work.
Right. People are going to be a fan of that.
Become the entry point.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But this is interesting. Like as musicians out there, you need to think about the bigger picture and be cultivating that audience for you, not just for the show that you have coming up on Saturday night.
Yeah.
It's really working on that. And we've talked about that in a lot of ways.
It's all connecting, is connecting with your audience, connecting with your fellow artists, connecting with the venue or whatever. But ultimately, all of that led up to me just wanting to create something new. It's just something that was instilled in me.
So how, like, for someone that wants to put on a show locally, how do you go about finding a venue? I mean, I realize we said the networking, right? Like,
well, it's not just networking. If you have never done it, like, who are you going to sell it? First of all, you got to think about what your show you're doing.
Yep.
Are you doing a cover band? Are you doing original music? Are you doing a festival? Are you doing a fundraiser? Are you doing? I mean, there's all kinds of variables when it comes to
I have a question. Maybe I've asked the wrong question.
Okay.
Or I've asked the questions in the wrong order. Obviously, at some point you have to find or create, but a venue needs to exist, a place for the people to come and see the show.
Or you create the venue.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But a venue needs to exist.
You need a place for people to gather.
Correct. For at least for the night of the show, if no other time. Right. It can fall apart the next day.
Build your tent.
Yep.
And have people come and sit under your tent.
So that's there. The audience, it would seem, is the first thing to build, right? You have, because if you don't think that you can bring people to your tent, it's not Field of Dreams, right? If you build it, people won't necessarily come.
Well, that's the thing with the build it and they will come. Yes, you build it and they will come. It doesn't mean just build a venue.
Well, right, fair. Yes, it's not just build the venue. It's build the whole thing.
You got to build everything.
Yeah.
And that includes the crowds.
Yeah.
Why would somebody want to come to see your baseball team play? Why? That's the first thing you have to answer. Why would people want to come and see your music or see your band?
Yeah.
Why would somebody want to come and see your play?
Ooh.
Right?
Ask the question why.
Yeah.
Yeah.